right?
Ian's quite tall, so.
Well, how tall are you?
5'10".
He's not tall.
He's got a tall upper body.
Have you got a long upper body?
That's about the nicest thing anybody said to me.
Ian, Ian, but you have met before, haven't you, at a party?
I did. I met you at a party, which I just realised a few minutes ago.
How did you not realise who he was?
No. Ian mentioned Dot, and I said, you must be Dot's husband.
I don't like that. It's annoying me.
Well, it's because Ian's got a very...
No, that's it.
Yeah.
That's it.
Okay.
Just get close, please. That's it. And I can see you now.
That's better. I'm not got to look at you through the gap.
Yeah, I know. It just makes me feel dizzy.
Dizzy?
It's wonky, isn't it? I'm going like that. My eyes can't adjust.
It's good to meet you.
Likewise.
Again.
Yes. Again. Well, I suppose we're in a completely different context. And I mean, I know you reasonably well. So, and I know you in lots of ways. And I also know a lot about you, which Mike probably doesn't know anything about you.
Well, nor do our listeners.
No. So, what do you want to talk about? Because that's the whole point. I can guide you if you want me to, but it's entirely up to you what you want to talk about.
I mean, I can tell you a bit about myself, and then
that would be great. So it sounds like you've had quite an interesting career.
That's probably a fair description. I started off. I was 17 years old when I went to the Navy, and
the Navy. Sorry.
Anyway, my dad didn't want me to go. He was in the Merchant Navy, and he sort of absolutely don't go.
So were you in merchant or?
I was first in national service, which was in the Navy in South Africa, military conscription.
Right. Okay.
So I did that in the Navy, which was fortunate. I was going into the Merchant Navy. I was already accepted into the Merchant Navy into the officer program. So instead of going to the infantry, which was where I was originally called up to, they said, "No, you can go to the Navy." So you had to do a year's service, and it had come down from 2 years service the year before, and then you were sort of let go. And it was towards the end of the apartheid regime in South Africa, so there was still another 4 years to run on it. This was in 1990, end of 1990, and there was still about 4 years to run with the apartheid regime. So there was still national service.
Is there still national service now?
No.
Not at all.
No, they did away with it completely, which was, in my view, a big mistake.
Can you answer me a question? Does China have national service?
Yes, they do have conscription, but it's not across the board. So it's it's almost it's the same with Russia as well. They do it in terms of if you're a university graduate and you're going to university, you can get deferred, and then you only have to do 1 month service. They do the same in places like Turkey and.
But Dubai do national service, don't they?
Dubai?
Yeah.
No.
They don't?
They're too precious.
Oh, they don't? I thought they did.
No. They've got a professional army, although what they've basically been doing over recent years is trying to encourage, it's like a, not conscription, but it's almost like a national service type thing, like a civil service. To different sort of, you can serve the community in different ways.
Okay.
It seems like sort of building sort of character in young people.
Turkey do it though, don't they?
Turkey do it, but it's watered down.
Is it?
I had a friend in Dubai who's Turk, and he had to go, but he was 35 and he had to go and do national service. But
really?
Go back to Turkey. He was 35 and he'd been out of the country and dodged it for years, and then they eventually caught up with him on a holiday back to Turkey. Said, we've got you. Yeah. And he ended up, and in the end, they sort of let him off. I think he had to do basic training 2 months and then he was gone. So I sort of did that and then went straight into the Merchant Navy. So it was navigation officer training program, and then I spent the next 15 years at sea, which was on container ships, cargo ships, bulk carriers, tankers, tugs, tugboats. And then I left there. So Dot and I met in 1995. We started going out in 95. We got married in 99. And then we, it was like, do we have kids?
How old were you then?
When we were married?
No, in 99.
In 99, I was 27.
Still young.
I was 27, and we sort of, no, I was 26 actually. And then it was a case of, well, we're not going to have kids until you sort of come ashore.
Yeah.
That was it. We were married for 10 years before Ethan was born, the oldest. And
you weren't ashore then, though,
I was. I was, because what happened was in 2006, I was working in Scotland on tugboats, and I got a call from the company. They said, would you like to come in for an interview? Thinking this was for a seagoing position. Meantime, they were interviewing for a management position. And spoke to them on Monday and said, and I thought about it, quite interesting. So consequently, I've spent the last 15 years in management of ships and shipping companies. So I spent my entire working life either at sea or, connected to the sea, managing ships and shipping lines. And the last one in Dubai, we ended up in Dubai. We lived in Dubai for 13 years. We moved there in 2008. And, I was sort of worked my way up through the ranks, so to speak, and became the managing director of the shipping company before we moved here. And then at 48, I decided to have a little sort of sabbatical
side
detour, something like that, and sort of try and sort of realign what I wanted with the rest of my career and the rest of my life, and decided to go and study theology. So got back here and moved straight into the cottage across the way here, and I was already registered at the University of London, the London School of Theology, and started a degree program in theology, which could ultimately end up in you becoming an ordained minister.
Oh, right. Okay.
Whatever denomination that you choose. So, and then in the first year, I had to do a placement in the Church of England, which was Bridgewater.
Why Church of England?
Well, that was just circumstantial, really. It was just a rub because that was the nearest one available that
wanted somebody.
Yeah, could kind of accommodate me. So it's quite a commitment, minister, to do that.
Why?
Because he's got to sort of supervise your placement. There's a certain amount of things he has to do during that period. And, whether it be signing your tasks, ask you to do something, checking up you've done something. It ends up quite a bit to do. He has to report back to the college.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Similar to, like, we have students in the rehab, and it's similar to that. We have that responsibility. So somebody comes, you've got to teach them this, you've got to teach them that. They go to group, they learn about one-to-one therapy, they learn how to assess, and da-da-da-da-da.
That's such a dramatic change in kind of life and role and everything.
Yeah, I mean, it was. I think it was a natural flow from. Parents were shocked, and so was a lot of people connected with me.
What did your family think? Trusting your children.
Yeah, I mean, they were very supportive, and I think it was a natural outflow from us becoming Christians 5 years ago, 6 years ago now, actually. And it was just a natural sort of. We'd always had a sort of latent Christian faith, and Dot was a lot more faithful than I was, and probably still is. But we were sort of cultural Christians. But then we started going to church in Dubai, which is a strange place to become a Christian, and it was a big church we were in, multinational, 90 different nationalities. And it just sort of stuck, and we really enjoyed it, and we started growing in our faith. We started growing in our relationship with the church and with God, and it improved our relationship, and improved all the relationships around us improved. And so we just thought, and then I started getting involved in a few groups in the church, which led me on to the theology side, and then thought, I might like to study this, which is what I ended up doing.
Camera's gone. Do you need to do anything?
Gone off. 1 second.
Is that a battery, is it?
Okay, we will resume.
And that was me, really. In a nutshell.
Okay.
So I suppose, in a sense, it's making a decision like that. Giving up your job, moving back to a different to a country, you knew obviously, but and making a choice to go from having 5 years of experience in a church as such, where yes, okay, it's improved your family life. That's quite radical, isn't it? I mean, it's a bloody huge move. Oh, sorry, I swore. A huge move.
Yeah, I think you're right. It is. Although it didn't feel radical, it just felt like a natural sort of flow from what we were doing. But never felt like a radical move until it got to the point when I was trying to figure out, how does this play out vocationally?
Yes,
how can I sort of map a career for myself? Do I want to go into ministry? Do I want to actually become pastor or minister of a church or some kind of movement, all sorts of different organizations? And that's where I am now, in a sense, is that trying to figure out really where I stand on that, and that became quite a difficult thing for me, because not unusual, because many of the students at the university go through the same sort of upheaval during their studies. And somebody has described it. One of the professors at the university described it to me as, imagine a car. So you drive a car into a garage, and somebody disassembles the entire car and then puts it back together again. So that's akin to what it is like studying at a theological university.
But isn't that in every university though? So you send somebody off to university, say a young person, for example, and you get them into university, and they've gone on whatever course they've chosen to do, and they've got there and thought, oh, I'm not sure I like this, or I'm not sure I'm going to go with this, so I might change. A lot of young people do change their courses after their first year. And not just young people, older people as well, and then once you start doing something, unless you are 100% sure that you've picked the right course, people go through that wobbly bit.
I think that's I think that's a fair comment, but I think the wobbly bit comes in theology, in terms of the fact that it's about your character formation, it's about spiritual formation, it's about it changes you, and you could argue that yes, that's the same in possibly any course, but I think theology is something that it really gets into your bones, and it starts it starts something in you, and it takes longer for different people to sort of figure it all out, so to speak.
Well, I would say the same on a counselling course, because when people do counselling courses, there's an expectation that you enter into your own personal counselling.
Sure.
And then on top of that, you're working with people that perhaps you wouldn't ordinarily work with in your placement. And then on top of that, there's an expectation when you're on a counselling course to talk about some of your personal things, and other people are talking about their personal things. And then it creates that whole kind of new world that you're not used to. Yes. And you've got to look at some of the stuff that you've not really wanted to look at.
It's a lot about self-reflection. So as you're learning things, as you're getting involved in different topics, and it is such a wide course. I mean, everybody said to me, it's very narrow and very Christian, very wide.
Yeah.
It examines all aspects of
life,
being.
And
And that, then everything you learn becomes a self-reflection. And you've then got to sort of figure out, and some of it just stays there, and you just don't understand it.
Yeah.
You can't get to grips with it until one fine day in the morning you wake up and think, oh yeah, get it. And it's about that sort of self-discovery and that self-fulfillment that you've got to go through those phases. So and I'm still not really sure where I want to be in my late 40s. I'm 50 next year.
Have you completed the studies, or are they?
No, I'm sort of halfway through, just a little bit less than halfway through in my second year, and it's now a case of picking that up at some point. And I've basically decided that I'm going to go back into the maritime field.
Okay.
I've been trying to sort of get back on the horse, back on the bike over the last 6-8 months, and then from there take on the studies again.
Okay. It's like a part-time
sort of
remote learning type thing.
Yeah, and a lot of people have done that, and they've found it. I found it difficult for the few months that I went online at the end of last year. I really struggled with it, to be perfectly honest. So I'm going to have to find a way to manage that differently. and we'll see where we go with it.
Coming back to the realization of change for your self-development and your spiritual life, there is that bit, isn't it, when you enter kind of that, it's a whole new world in a sense. It's not, but you enter that and you discover things about yourself that you don't like, because that's what therapy does too, isn't it? And things about yourself that you think, wow, I've got a talent that you don't necessarily recognize in yourself, or other people might see it, but you don't see it in yourself, if you see what I'm saying. It's a bit like when you go, I mean, I know I say, oh, I need to do with losing some weight, and people go, don't be ridiculous, you look great. You know, do you know what I'm saying? It's a little bit like that. It's coming to realize, actually, I do look great and I don't need to lose weight now.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's loads on the theology course on like counselling and psychology. You go through a lot of those angsty periods where you think, that is something I recognise in myself and I don't like it.
Yeah.
And you've got to you've got to sort of try and come to terms with it. And I think the thing about Christian faith and Christian theology is that something that is, as a hallmark of the faith, is that we are all sinners, or we all fall short of that standard. And it's something you can round it off and quite easily, but acknowledge it, but also acknowledge that you want to change.
I hate the word sinners, because I think that's
I know, it's a terrible
it's quite an unkind word, isn't it?
It is.
And I think sometimes nobody's perfect is probably a better.
Yeah, I know. It's just that it's a word that kind of encompasses the whole thing, because it's not just about doing something that's not right or bad or whatever the case is. It's really just falling short of a standard. That might be. It could be anything. It's not that you're a murderer or.
Well, it's like me swearing on the podcast and Mike telling me off, isn't it? It's just, no, but it is that, isn't there? And then you've got to deal with, am I embarrassed about that? Yes or no? Is it okay for me to do that? Yes or no? You go through a process, whether you like it or not. You go through a process, and depending on how quick your process is, depends on how quick your progress is. If you see what I'm saying, I think a lot of people see that, and I suppose you've had to come to terms with the fact that actually I need to take time back here.
Yeah, and I think recognizing there's also a lot of it's in the academic world, you are doing something, you're studying. In the Christian world, it's more about someone else changing you.
Oh, okay, yeah,
and that is also something you've got to try and come to terms with. And understand that as much effort as you were going to put into this you're not going to get the rewards out of that. It's more about coming into a relationship and allowing yourself to be changed, and that is maybe a little bit of a difference. And it's so easy to slip back into that. Well, if I do this and I do that and I do this better and I try not to swear and I try not to do this, everything's going to be fine. And
it's where it comes from originally.
Yeah, and it's not your own will. It's
but that's that. You talk about. So very often in therapy, we talk about different ego states and where they're driven from, and is there a link to how we're brought up as children and how were parented, but also now how we parent ourselves, which links back to TA and various other bits and pieces. But I wonder if you would identify that within yourself around, do you feel that how you were brought up has influenced where you are today in?
Wow. Yeah. You hit on a point there, but I think that is, I think you are a product of your environment, you're a product of your upbringing, and your character. They say that apples and father tree and that nonsense, but I do see myself turning into my father.
Scary.
It is pretty scary, and but I think there is something in that, without sort of becoming kind of a slave to it, without becoming sort of allowing that to sort of dominate you, especially if it's something that it's not particularly good, or it's maybe one of those attributes. It's probably best just not to dwell on it too much.
But it's there.
It's there,
and then that surely that links then back to when you go to university and you're doing quite an intense course about your own development and your spirituality, etc., that then puts into question, and you have to examine that. You can't just ignore that and put it to bed like you've just said.
I know, and it's the one thing that it's a strange thing when it comes to family relationships and everything else, and it's it's a difficult one to come to terms with, because there is that temptation quite often around friends and family members to try and change them as well.
Yeah.
So it's something that you can't ignore. At the same time, in the faith, it's something you're trying to sort of you want to help others, and that's a temptation that I've had to sort of hold back. Like people have just said to me, "We don't want to hear about it. We'll come to that realization ourselves."
But isn't that isn't it, because if you want to argue that, are you the person that should suggest that to somebody in the same manner as, say, a counsellor to suggest somebody reads a book or looks at a theory, or suggests that they might, have you ever thought about where this comes from? It might be coming from your family, whatever. Is somebody that has a faith, do they have the right to kind of force that?
Yeah, no, I know what you're coming from, and I think that's a discussion I've had with many people, and I think that's right. You don't have a right to. I think you feel like you have a responsibility to sort of.
You do
suggest. I have a responsibility to.
But do you?
Well, I think within the faith, you have a responsibility to not keep it to yourself,
but
without forcing it on anyone.
So you don't knock on people's doors.
No, and I think it's a case of allowing those sort of, those sort of events to happen. You're not looking for. I'm not going down supermarket aisles trying to find disciples. But, although there has been a few instances where people have walked up to me, and asked me about my faith.
That's interesting.
Work, in a taxi. Wherever there's been many instances where it's been the case, but you're right. It's a very fine line. You sort of got to walk there, and without sort of trying to sort of force your will on someone, or trying to sort of be dominant, or trying to sort of condemn people as well, because that's the tone, or that's the way that sometimes comes across in some.
Of course,
some people.
Do you think that it's got harder over time? I know that you've only been on this journey for a short period, but do you think as people come out of COVID and go back to socializing and so on, do you think it's been harder to have those kind of conversations?
That's essentially the point. I would say it's become easier with respect to the fact that a lot of people probably had to reflect on their own mortality. Having gone through some tough times through COVID. And I think it has maybe not made people, there was a study recently that something like 65% of people in the UK pray. Who do they pray to? What they do. And it's maybe the survey is wrong, or whatever the case is, but it's still a high proportion of people, even if it's 50 or 40%, I'd be quite surprised.
I suppose it's quite a private thing, as in lots of people, they maybe pray in their own way, whether that's a form of talking to themselves. I mean, I go down the road driving, and I'll be chatting to myself and thinking about things. Do I call that praying? No, but do I call it reflection? Probably yes.
And is prayer reflection?
And that was going to be my question.
Or is it direct? And I suppose I'm going to ask you directly: do you pray?
Sometimes is the answer to that. Yeah. If there's something going on that I'm concerned about, then the answer is yes. I mean, I am a baptized Christian. I can't remember the last time I went to church.
Weddings, funerals, and bar mitzvahs.
Exactly that. Yes. But yeah.
Do you feel comfortable saying that, though?
Do you know what? No, I don't.
And I picked that up straight away, because I think is that half of the challenge around this? Is it the fact that people don't want to say that they pray? There's a level of embarrassment. Are you going to be judged by that?
I think that comes back to the second part of what you said just now about being comfortable. Yeah, is it more difficult? And I think in terms of modern society, it is more difficult.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think in terms of the fact that the church and various elements of the church have had a lot of bad press in
for sure
years, for various things, and over the centuries have had a lot of bad press, and that was one thing that kept me from the church for a long time.
Okay, that's
a lot of that baggage, and then I was trying to sort of put it away, and then I realized, well, it actually isn't about all that stuff, and it's about something else, and I managed to reconcile that. But I think it is difficult. It is difficult because we live in a post-Christian society. We live in a post-Christian Europe, UK, and everything else. And in terms of the state religion isn't really the state religion. It's just still the Church of England, and by all accounts, it is the state religion. Same in Germany with Holland and various places. They have a state religion. They have no power.
No,
in terms of they have no power in terms of government.
No.
Used to. So, but I think now, as there's all that sort of politically and everything else, it's just not a popular thing to be a Christian in many places.
But what is a Christian? I mean, is a Christian somebody that gets up in the morning and says their prayers? Or is it, because for me, a Christian is somebody that does their best. Okay, I have a faith. I've always had a faith. It was my salvation as a child because of what happened to me as a kid. If I didn't have a faith, and at times, and I say that, it feels emotional just saying that, at times I think if I didn't believe that there was something there, that actually I probably wouldn't be here today, because I just needed to. It was almost like having a parent. And I know that sounds odd to some people, but it was like having just somebody to talk to, just somebody, something, whatever you want to describe it. And I'm very childlike about my description of God and Jesus and stuff. But, you know, it's having what is your understanding, you know, and when you have like an organized religion, that it puts too many parameters on people, perhaps, and then they can't do that. They then can't have the freedom to go, do you know what, I'm just going to talk to somebody while I'm in the car or something or whatever.
I think that's the bit that I was trying to get to, is that I think that faith is not necessarily a specific religion. And I think there are lots of people out there that believe in some kind of higher power, and what that is probably quite personal to each individual, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it is Jesus or whoever. And I think, you know, going back to what we were saying about, do you talk about it openly? I think you're right in that there's lots of faiths that, particularly Christian and Catholics, who don't necessarily talk about it as openly as other religions and faiths, and I think a large part of that is because of the negativity that can come from that.
I think there's that, and then I think you take the way the world has gone in the last 250 years since the Industrial Revolution. It's become a more intellectual. People going to university, people sort of moving away from something you feel or something you sense, or the emotional side, and more into the intellectual sort of realm. So people have sort of not chucked away, but are, you know, and I felt this with myself as well, you know, sort of in my studies and everything else, you put up barriers against spiritual stuff and all sorts of other stuff. So I think it's just a natural outflow from the fact that we live in this world now that is becoming, it wants facts and figures. It wants, you know, evidence.
It's evidence that based practice. That's what it is, isn't it?
And this is why I really encourage people to try and understand that science and Christianity are not two separate things. And that's a completely different podcast, I would say. But I think science and religion, science and Christianity, and the fact that you don't have to leave your brain at the door going to church. You know, everything else is really important.
So what is it that is Christianity? What makes you a Christian? So for me, what makes you a Christian is that you do your best. Whatever is, you do your best. And my belief is that there is something greater than myself that I go to for support and guidance. That's what I believe for me.
If my minister's not watching, I'll agree with you.
I was just about to say exactly the same, is that I have always felt that it's important to do your best. And whenever I've worked with somebody or chatted to somebody, I've always said that, I don't really care how well you do as long as you do your best.
Yeah.
Because I think that's really important. But also it's about kindness.
Yeah. I agree.
And it's about being kind to
yes,
whoever.
I think that can be lost if
definitely. And I think that's really important to me.
Can I comment on that? And I've got it in my head, but I think that the whole sort of core of the gospel is really about the fact that we can never be good enough. Right, and that's really where the gospel sort of finds its resonance in people that are saying, "I've tried so hard, but I can't."
Is it that you're not good enough, or is it about not settling? Because I think by saying you're not good enough, I'm good at what I do for a living. I know I'm good at what I do for a living, but I do everything to keep that good.
Again, it's language,
and that's what I'm saying. And I think, does the church, does that kind of, those studies, all of that stuff, create barriers instead of, because it feels incredibly judgmental to say to somebody, you're not good enough, or I strive to be the best I can possibly be at work, the best I can possibly be as a wife, the best I can possibly be as a mum, grandmother, person in the community. I do my best, and what I do things to improve myself by reading books, by doing my own therapy. I go on and on and on and on and on. You know the kind of person I am, so I absolutely do my best. Now, but I know to keep that level or to improve that, I need to do certain things. So I need to read. I need to do this. I need to do all of that. If I don't do that, then I won't sustain that.
Look, I mean, I don't think that there are churches that do tell you that, but I think those aren't the ones you want to go to. So it's not the type of faith you want to be involved with. I think in answer to both of your questions, it's really about, I think it's really, coming to the realization yourself that I want to change my life, I think is what it is, without actually sort of saying I'm not good enough, or I fall below a certain standard, or whatever the case is, or I'm that dreaded sinner, that dreaded person that does all the bad things. So you come to a realization, I think anybody coming into the faith comes to a realization that they want to change, and everyone for their own reasons. And everybody's got their own sort of pathway they're following.
Is it that they want to change, or that actually, I'm not sure I agree with that, because is there a point where people don't necessarily want to change, but what they want to do is have something else in their life that allows them the option to change? It's not that they need to change, they want to change, but it gives them an option to kind of explore that on a different level.
I've come across that, people that probably not there yet, not ready for that commitment. And what I found is what I've generally found is that people that do come to a church, or they come to see a pastor, they somehow open a Bible, or they come to some kind of experience that they want to do something. Inevitably, I've found, and maybe there's instances where it's not the case, but they actually do want to change their lives.
Yeah,
and usually
I hear that.
Better, because that was just saying, well, I'm not happy the way things are going in my life. And everybody's got different reasons. Everybody's got a different set of issues. But
I quite like to go and be a minister in a church, just purely so that the person that does it sometimes can talk English, and actually I find them quite patronizing sometimes.
Terribly.
I recently went to a service, and I thought, I don't go to church. I used to go to church without fail. But I recently went to a service, and I thought, are you joking me? You've got to read something off a piece of paper, and you can't even do that. And it's like, it was I was embarrassed, and I thought, I almost wanted to get up and say, well, I tell you what, I'll lead the service. Let's go, in front of the whole kids, and all this kind of stuff.
And I think this is where we haven't really found we go to a church, but we haven't really sort of found our way in terms of a denomination. I think that wasn't really very important to us. The church we went to was something that sort of really spoke to us.
It's the people rather than the church.
Exactly. And as they say, as a church is not a building, it's the people inside it. And I think that's also comes to what we're talking just now about the fact that you do have, what does it take to be a Christian, you were saying, and it was like, well, it's not all about going to church. It's not all about the organized religion and everything else around it. There are elements within it, like baptism and communion and everything else, that are important to the faith, even in a loosely organized way. They are important, but I think a lot of other things, around the organized religion are not. They put a lot of people off. They in some ways, many of them just don't speak to this age. They're not.
But a lot of people of this age, say Mike's age, for example, want to get married in church.
Yeah,
sure. They don't want to get married anywhere else.
I've got friends that are getting married in a church in a few weeks' time, and they've had to go and do the whole, excuse the terminology, but stamp the book.
Yeah.
And they've had to go and go to church a number of times to be able to be eligible, which I think it's a really interesting way. It's almost like being it's like going to the Tesco supermarket and collecting coupons to be able to get some discount. It's a bit of an odd way of
and it's not
doing it.
And I tend to agree with that, and I don't think it's some people will say that getting married in a church, it's a union between you and your partner and God, and therefore you really should be a Christian in order to get married in a church. So a lot of churches will just outright say, well, you don't come to this church. They'll do it in a nice way and say, well, you're not.
Yeah.
You're not part of this church. You'd have to join the church before we get married. And others would say, come for a 4-week course and then we'll sort it all out.
You get your badge and you can do it.
I'm kind of stuck on the fence with it a bit, but I do also think, I also ask, why do people need to get married in the church?
It's for Instagram, right?
Of course,
it's for the photos.
Yes.
I think that's a big part of it. I'm not married, but I think that's a big part of it. It's actually about the photos. There's an element of atmosphere. Clearly, the atmosphere in a church is much nicer than a room, but I think ultimately it's not about the faith at all.
And I think for some people it is, and for some people it isn't. So I would not get married unless I could get married in church.
Yeah,
that's how strongly I feel about it. When Dave and I got married, because I'd been married before, and I was married into the Catholic Church, so I had to do a lot of reconciliation, I suppose, to get married in the Church of England church.
Yeah,
if you see what I'm saying. And it was, I was a young girl when I got married. I was a child when I got married, and I, it's not necessarily was the right thing for me to do. But for me to get married, when Dave and I got married, if they wouldn't have married me in church, I wouldn't have got married. And that was definitely but that's because my belief is when you get married in a church, you're doing that in a place of worship, and you're doing that in the eyes. I know it doesn't matter where you go. In my belief is God's everywhere, so it doesn't matter. Sure. So but you're getting married in God's home, really, for want of it, and it reflects. And also, the guy that married us was just the best. He was a wonderful, kind, beautiful man that we built a relationship with, and to this day, I still think of him fondly. And I think, in a sense, by encouraging people who want to get married in a church, gives them the opportunity to meet those kind of people, like you were saying about the people in the church. Now, my children went to a Baptist church for Sunday school, and we used to go on Sunday and join them, and it was, and it was great. And I love that. I've never stuck to one denomination. I feel very strongly that I will go wherever I feel welcomed. If you see what I'm saying, I stopped. I stopped going to one. I went to. We moved and I went to the first Sunday that we were there. I thought, pop down to the local church. Well, I walked down there in a pair of jeans and in fact I had a pair of shorts on and a shirt, and I got looked up and down. No welcome. Come to our church. It was like, you have to go in your Sunday best or you're not welcome. And it's like, no, I don't want to go to a church like that. I don't want to be part of an organisation that does that. I want to be part of an organisation that welcomes people whatever they're wearing.
And I think that's a shame, because I do see that. I've seen it so many times now that churches, when I say churches, individual churches, become so insular and sort of wrap themselves up in their own community, their own little community.
Yes,
they forget what the
wider community. Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, the church, I think church generally worldwide does a lot of good. And it's just I think individual churches just sometimes just do themselves a disservice.
This is just me being ignorant because I don't know. So if, say, you've gone to university and you've done your theology course and you've done all of that, and then you think, oh, actually, I want to be a Church of England minister, whatever you call them. I don't know what you call vicar. Do you then have to go and do more training?
Yes. Yeah.
And how long does that take?
That could take, that's about another 2 years.
Bloody hell.
So if you go through Church of England, then many cases where you can, depending on what your degree is, you can, maybe if you did an English degree or some kind of humanities degree or something like that, they would fast track you through the program, but it would still take you better part of 18 months, 2 years
to become ordained.
Become ordained.
So speaking about you personally, what's your I don't know if dream is the right word, but what's your goal or outcome that you would like over the next however long?
I've been looking back at the reason that I originally went to study, and that was because I wanted to help people. And that might sound really cheesy, but there was a big part of me that thought that a lot of the problems in this world are a result of the fact that people are missing something in their lives. And I thought that's something that was something that I could help people with. And that was why I started out. And I think going through the whole thing, I still think I'd like to be in some way some sort of chaplaincy, or become a chaplain in some organization, and try and somewhere I'm out there, and I'm talking about it, and not necessarily on a street corner, but sort of out there, sort of like helping.
Yeah.
And trying to sort of, and not only in spiritual ways, but in practical ways as well. So I've got a lot of friends in the maritime world, in the shipping world, that have gone to work for Mercy Ships, and there's another organisation, OM, I don't know what it stands for, something, Ministries International, something like that. And there's a few Christian maritime shipping organisations, Stella Maris and Missions to Seafarers, and they provide chaplains and chaplaincy work all around the world.
Right.
So that's something I've been considering, and whether I go through an ordination process, you can become a chaplain. You can study separately, become a chaplain. There are organisations that will license you as a chaplain outside of any sort of ordination.
Yeah.
You don't have to any degree or anything like that.
Okay.
They will provide you with the training.
Yes.
So there's that, and but I think eventually I will finish the degree. Maybe over the next sort of 4 or 5 years, and but then in the meantime, I just felt, and this year I felt a bit rotten because I just felt like I've not been helping.
Yeah,
I've not been out there, and I've a lot of self-reflection this year. So I really want to get out there and help.
But I suppose that's how our charity was set up. So the charity was set up because I wanted to get out there and help people, and I think that model of, does it have to be through religion, or does it just have, or can it be through, and everybody's got their own, what they want to do, if you see what I'm saying. And I appreciate that. But I think sometimes people can help so much and they just don't, and it's not about money. It's just, sometimes it might be about asking Mike, how do you set up an email? I know that sounds crazy, but I haven't got a clue sometimes. And that's helping somebody in your community. Sure. It might be that you make a cake, and I know I always persuade Dot to make a cake for us for the coffee morning or whatever. But it's like, it's just sometimes that, isn't it? And I think you don't, and that's being Christian as well, isn't it?
Absolutely. And I think it's, and I don't think there just isn't enough of that within certain churches. There just isn't enough of there isn't enough of loving your neighbour. There isn't enough of sort of embracing the community outside of the church community.
Well, I went to I keep singing the song, "We Ploughed the Fields and Scatter." What's it called? When they were the kids did it at church the other day. Oh my gosh, I've forgotten. Anyway, I went to this thing to see the kids, and ordinarily, what would happen is they'd collect food, and then that food would be put into parcels and given to people in the community, as in those in need. That everybody knows the people in their village that's in need. Everybody does. But they gave it to the food bank. They gave the money, Harvest Festival. They gave the money from the the food from the Harvest Festival to the food bank. And now you could say, okay, that goes to the wider community, but it goes to the wider community.
Yeah, not necessarily.
It doesn't go to the community in which that church was and in which those children are part of. And I thought, I don't know if I agree with that, because it's going either to the local town or the biggest village. It's not actually in that little village. And I thought that felt really sad. And Dave and I had a long conversation about that, because I remember when my children were younger and we used to do it, we'd make little parcels up. We'd have the Harvest Festival at the school or at the church, wherever it was. And then that harvest, generally at the church, to be honest. And then the children would know where to deliver. They were told to go and deliver this parcel to that family or to that elderly person or whatever. And I just thought, that's missing. You miss that if all you do is you go, oh, let's go to the food bank, because actually the food bank, everybody goes to the food bank.
It becomes a bit
commercial almost.
Anonymous in a
yes.
sense.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
You're right.
And I think and I've felt this about, anyway, if you could hear it.
I'll hashtag him in, don't worry.
I think the thing for me is a lot of mission, as they call it in the church. The church does a lot in our church, doesn't work with half a dozen different mission partners. And usually a liaison or a link in the church with the particular mission. These are organized mission. These are organized organizations, massive organizations, many of them, like Tier Fund and Reach Out and Green Door. And these are organizations that really are huge, and we support them. We support them financially. We support them, in different ways. But I sometimes just feel that it's not personal.
It's not local.
It's certainly not local.
And that's the thing.
Yeah, sometimes it is. Sometimes there are one. Few of them are kind of localish.
But we have to, as a charity, we have to pay a rent to support the parishioners of that village or that town or whatever. And I just think, hold on a minute, you get like 60, 70 people in your church hall that you ordinarily wouldn't get, that come along, they get free tea, coffee, they make a donation if they want to, they bit of cake, whatever, they get the opportunity. There's always clothes there that Mandy will always dish out to people who've got nothing. She'll, just hand it over to them, and they know they've got kids, so they'll get the school uniform that Dot's sent to me to give to, do you know what I mean? And stuff like that. We still have to pay £48 to use their hall. And we had to pay when we use the church, the other church. And I just think, and we do it locally. And I think
it's lost a bit of that community.
Yes. Yeah. And don't get me wrong, I appreciate that they actually have to pay for the heating, pay for that, but they would have had to pay for that anyway.
Yeah, I think there is a sense that churches have to remain relevant, and as I say, a lot of them do a lot of good, and you see in a lot of inner city churches, in particular. Sometimes you do get the sort of in the countryside or some of the smaller towns a little bit of a different attitude.
Yes,
that the inner city churches in particular tend to be a lot more welcome to everything, to migrants, to people that are less well off, all sorts of different crowds that anybody comes through the door. Whereas in some places, it's a little bit, as you said earlier, people look you up and down and and they immediately put a barrier up.
Yeah.
And I think that goes completely against everything that Christian faith stands for.
Well, we even leave them cakes in one of our coffee chats. They don't even say thank you. And you think, really?
Right, I'm really conscious of time.
Good God.
We've sped through an hour. We always ask everybody at the end of the podcast what their goal is for the next 12 months. And I know you talked about your dream and all of that kind of stuff, but what is one goal for the next 12 months that you would like to achieve, that you can share with us, and we can have you back in a year's time and go, right, did you achieve that?
Does it have to be something very specific?
It's your goal.
Up to you. It's your goal. You've got to make sure that it's a SMART goal. So it's I've got to remember what SMART.
Specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time boundaries.
There we go. The time bound is a year.
I was in management for 60. I know that. There's a very obvious one for me, and that's to get back to work. But I think in an overarching way, I want to be able to trust myself more That's so wishy-washy and it's so unachievable, isn't it? But okay, I'll tell you what. I'll just say to myself, I do want to be able to trust myself more in so many different ways in my life. But I would say that my goal is to get back to work at the level that I want.
Okay.
Next month.
Fantastic. That sounds great. That's good enough.
That's what I'm.
Brilliant.
Part of that is trusting myself.
I do want to argue with you just very slightly there about you saying about, trusting yourself a little bit more. And I think we can all trust ourselves. And I think we all have a tool, which is our gut will tell us. Yes. And so many of us ignore that, and it's great for your mental health to actually recognize we all have a tummy, and inside your tummy, if you get yourself in touch with that feeling that's inside your tummy, you know what's right and wrong.
Yeah. But also, you just trusted yourself to achieve that goal by declaring it publicly on our podcast. So
nationwide,
that's it. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much.
Thanks, Ian.
Thanks for having me.
We'll have you back again soon. Thank you.
Thank you.